The person that we have in our mix today is someone that started his career in the public sector with the Accountant General and later worked with the groundnut operation then and later worked with the UN system for a couple of years before proceeding to his studies in the UK, came back and founded basically the Deloitte then tax department. So if we are to discuss today about a tax, he is not a new person in terms of tax in the Gambia. And it is evident that if you are to mention tax specialists in the Gambia, if you are to mention number one, I think his name will need to pop up. And that is clearly manifested by some of the events that have just unfolded recently in the country, considering that he is actually taking in some platforms to help the Gambia achieve some of their tax desires. So tax is a very important conversation, which we rarely have. And I think this is the first time that in our platform, we are having such conversation in respect of taxation. And I think I'll just give a quote as mentioned by Benjamin Franklin, one of these prominent US writers, who indicates that there are only two things that are certain in life, which is death and tax. And I think that is clearly manifested. Just a couple of months ago, it was a hot topic when the Gambians were discussing about our tax. And I think statistics have shown that even in the Gambia, more than 50% of the government budget actually comes from taxation as well. And we have seen that progressive increase in terms of how Gambia is mobilized using tax as a way of financing their operations. So this conversation is basically going to look at different aspects of taxation that we have, and how can we help people to understand exactly what taxes are and how can we enhance compliance and what our jurisdiction is asking for. So Mr. Jatta, welcome on board. And I can give you maybe 1 or 2 minutes just to do an other brief intro before we kickstart with the event. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, and I also express my sincere thanks to the members of the FLE executive for organizing such a very useful webinar to at least share little knowledge that we all gathered. It is quite important that this arrangement, it's important of sharing knowledge. And I really will take this opportunity to thank the FL for their insightful and then the way they are actually going about spreading knowledge all over the country. As you are rightly mentioned, taxation is something that is very, very important for the development of this country. As you may be aware, we all knew where the government is in the position of how to go about raising the revenue for this country. But I think not going into details, I just maybe, I believe you've made enough introduction about who I am, and I worked with you in many years. So I think maybe not to take too much of your time on that, because these people, I believe, people are aware about who Mr. Jatta is and his contribution towards the tax profession in the Gambia. As you may rightly did mention, I'm really humbled to be giving this opportunity today to share the little knowledge that I have. And I strongly believe looking into what happened with the environment is very important for professionals who are also in the game, because once you are a finance person, you cannot do away with taxation, which is key. So as a result, we're here today to share the little knowledge that we know about this taxation. And a little bit about my background. I am a trained accountant, and currently the managing partner of Accord Associates. And prior to that, I was with Deloitte as the head of tax. And then also before Deloitte, I was working for UNDP and the central government, as he rightly did mention. So it's quite important that at least you have a brief background of who I am. So I think, Mr. Moderator, this is some of the key things that actually I wanted to share. Maybe now, if you, with your permission, you can tell what next to do, whether I should proceed. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep. Thank you very much, Mr. Jatta. So the way the program will go, this was just an intro, would be we'll have 45 minutes of questions from myself to you. Then after that, we will open the floor for the participants to throw in their questions for 15 to 20 minutes before we have the close of the program. As you rightly mentioned, this is a close collaboration or a sponsored event where the Accord Associates, which is one of the firms or leading firms in the consultancy, tax, and auditing profession, that sponsored this event to at least educate or use it as a form of sensitizing people in terms of taxation. But as I mentioned earlier, two things are certain: debt and tax. And each jurisdiction have their own tax system. So to start with, Mr. Jatta, can you give us an overview of what is our current tax system in the Gambia? And what are some of the type of taxes that we have, at least to start the pace of the conversation? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Salifu. This is a very important, introduction and questions. Like you did mention, and I think it is quite important that everybody must have that understanding. The Gambia is predominantly a tax-based economy, and therefore it is quite important that the government has given a very, very important role and giving a top priority in terms of revenue mobilization. And therefore, in the Gambia, the tax, we are basically having two types of taxes, which is you have the direct taxes and the indirect taxes. The direct taxes forms those which are considered as domestic taxes. Basically, they ranging from personal income tax, PAYE, withholding taxes, and you have corporation taxes, you have free taxes, and you have other taxes like dividend, royalties, and others which are associated with the revenue. When you go to the indirect taxes, which is called, that is mainly has to do with what we call VAT and customs. Our focus will be mainly on the domestic taxes, which is divided into direct taxes and indirect taxes. These are basically the key taxes that are actually, we are all confronted with on a day-to-day basis, be a corporation, individual, or a business. So these are the major taxes that affects our day-to-day life. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think that is a very good conversation to start with. The taxes, as you rightly mentioned, split into direct and indirect, and where we are looking at the direct taxes to be more specific, that affects us or that we confront with on daily basis. The indirect taxes are embedded sometimes in systems that are not seen or faced or to some extent feel by consumers to some extent, but they really affect our life. So that takes me to the next question, which looks at pre-establishment of company or in establishing institutions. I know this is taking us a little bit back, but different types of companies requires or are applied to pay different types of taxes. This is just a general conversation to have your advice on in establishing a company by considering the taxes that needs to be paid. What would be your advice on the best option to go for when you are registering a business? What are the factors to look out for in terms of registering, either being it a partnership or a sole proprietorship or a company in terms of taxation? What are the things that needs to be looked out for? in registering a company before we delve deep into the different types of taxes as you alluded earlier? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. And this is a very important question. And I think as advisor, we have received several questions on most of these international investors who normally want to establish companies in the Gambia. So the first questions they tend to ask, relating maybe just to quote to the exact questions you ask, they ask which type of business, company or entities would be best for us. Normally, there is no fixed answer to that. It has to depend on basically on what do you intend to do. Because if you looked at the type of entities you have, ranging from corporations, companies, from a partnership to individual. So each one of them has its own merits and demerits. So when you look at the company, basically, this is where the entity, it's becoming a legal separate entity from the owners. It has the right to sue and to be sued, and it has the right to own assets. And most often in this country, entities that are limited liabilities company, that indicates that the liability of the company is limited. And therefore, in the event the business fails, the owners, unless it is a negligent way of that make the business fail by the original owners, then perhaps the law will extend its hand beyond. But in the real sense of business, if the entity fails due to the fact that it was normal course of business that resulted into a failure of that business, the liability is limited to the assets of the company solely. On the other hand, when you look at a partnership is a group of people who have come together with common interests, but they do not detach themselves from the business. So as a result, where the business actually, where the business fails, the creditors have all the right to fall back on those partners, because the action of one partner affects the entire partnership. So it is quite important that's why it's good to make sure that people who are coming together in a partnership must have a common interest and must be able to look at the way forward, how they can all take the responsibility. Because if one person commits the entity, the obligation is on all of them. So this is why a partnership has even much greater risk than a company, a limited liability company. So when you come to a sole trader, the sole trader is like an individual who cannot be separated from the business. And in most often, when you are registering a sole trader, there is no distinction. Your personal TIN number is the one that is used to register the entity. So therefore, it's only by trading name that differentiates you. But the obligations and the entire returns come back to you. If you make profit, it's yours. But if there is also any obligations like debts and so forth, you are entirely responsible. So therefore, you cannot separate between the individual and his business. They are one and the same person. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that distinction, which is critical because it helps in the planning. It helps in risk management to know exactly what form of company to go by, to register with, and it helps in your tax planning. And it helps with your strategy focus as well in respect of paying off your obligation. So that will just take us to the next question, which looks at especially proprietorship or small businesses. In our mix, we have some people who are self or sole proprietors and find it sometimes difficult to know exactly what taxes are applicable to them from a general context in terms of their business. So would you give us maybe an overview or a context of some of the taxes that are applicable to sole proprietorship business as opposed to other businesses? Please, just to put a context to that.
All right, thank you very much. You know, when it comes to business, it's about the proceeds, the profitability that actually you realize in doing business. And as you know, any business activity that you have done will be subject to tax. So the main tax that is applicable is the tax on business income. Which is solely has to do with either on the on the profit or on turnover. As you know, that level doesn't differentiate between a company, partnership, and individual, because when you venture into a business, as an individual business can be a large entity. Yeah. So therefore, you will be responsible to pay. For you as an individual, you are not a corporation, you are individual. Like I did mention earlier, there is no distinction between the individual and the corporation, individual and the business. They are one and the same person. So therefore, for a sole trading entity, it is going to be taxed under the PAYE, because that entity is not separated from a company. But there is always what it is called, you have to look at the business income aspect of it, which is going to be the 1% if you are an audited entity, because you can be audited. Okay, you can also be you can also be sorry, you can be audited, and you can also pay the taxes accordingly. So that means you will pay the turnover tax with the which has to be calculated, and also looking at the individual, you can also pay taxes based on the profitability of it as well. So which means profitability is about 27% if it's a company. Profit. On the profit, on the profit, I think, so on the profit, you can pay normal income tax, because here you will be subject to profit tax on profit, because if you make profit, then you will subject tax on profit. I hope that answers your question, Salif.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Actually, why we're looking at that sole proprietorship, it's very critical, because some of the businesses, as recently we have businesses that are less than 500,000 revenue, they're looking at paying at least minimum of 3% of their gross turnover as a taxable as a tax in their business. So having this tension is very critical. And as you rightly mentioned, businesses are taxed on two folds, either on their gross turnover or on their profitability. But again, for sole proprietorship, as the distinction is not too far from the individual, you are taxed on based on the fourth schedule on payee as well, which is critical and important for the business to understand. But again, the distinction that you've made in terms of audited and non-audited, which is very critical for most of the people that are not aware, to know that once you are audited, there is at least a benefit, because based on the taxes, then you are paying 1% on gross turnover. But obviously on the profit, taxable profit is the same, which is the 27%, as you alluded to. That's a very good conversation. So this takes us to the next direct tax that we are discussing about. I know we had this discussion myself with you for the past over years around, the tax structure that we have on the CIT, which is the corporate income tax. I really want your opinion on this, Mr. Jatta. The tax on gross turnover and taxable profit. How does that affect businesses? How do we see this as a driver for success to businesses? Tax on gross turnover or on taxable profit, right. The minimum tax system. Mr. Jatta, what is your opinion on this as far as the business sustainability is concerned? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Salifo. I don't know, but you were asking very, very important and very useful questions. You know, as you, you know, when it comes to taxation, taxation is like an appropriations of what actually have I realized. And I've paid my fair share to the Revenue Authority as my contribution towards national development, which is key in keeping the nation afloat. Because if you look at what taxation is all about, it's about aggregating of all the incomes, all the the shares that individual businesses, partnership are paying towards the state in terms to be for them to be able to exercise the mandate that are given to them. So it's quite important that when it comes to look at the profitability side of it, which is tax on profit, that is not a problem at all, because that means you've realized something, and therefore you need to give a portion to the state in order to be able to execute their functions. The challenge which always businesses cry out is about on turnover. That's the minimum tax. Minimum tax is a challenge because whether you make profit or not, you'll be subject to pay the minimum tax. And this is normally like if you are an entity that is audited, you will pay 1% of the gross turnover. If you are unaudited, for some reasons, you will be required to pay 2% of that. But there is a problem, because it's always very heartening to see an entity paying minimum tax when it's still making losses. It's very difficult for entities to actually accept that. But unfortunately, because, you know, it is always a law, laws do not have good or bad, you know, in terms of application. When it comes to application, they will say, well, that is what the law says. And I know it's a concern for every business, because it means if you are sustaining losses, your loss will deepen, unfortunately. So this is where businesses stand, and because they are having some challenges in terms of realizations and how do you actually, because you can attest to that when you make a, pay a tax are not acceptable. So where do you actually categorize this minimum tax that you've actually paid? Although it's going to form part of your losses, but recognized losses to be carried forward will not form part of that, because the law requires you to only pay, you know, you cannot capitalize tax. So that loss that you will be accumulating will carry the loss, the tax that you actually paid. So it has to be stripped off. So this is the actual position of minimum tax in terms of business, the effect it has on businesses.
No, it's very critical where we do a comparisons where in certain countries that we say their taxes are primarily based on the performance, which goes with profitability rather than having the minimum gross tax minimum tax that we pay on turnover. But again, as you mentioned, as far as it's a law, irrespective of whether it helps the business. But the impact that we have seen so far, it has a very big impact in businesses. To some extent, businesses use their working capital to pay some of these taxes to some point. And this is really impacting on their performance and their ability to manage liquidity and so forth. So, which is of very good essence to have a discussion around. So thank you very much, Mr. Jatta, on that. And having looked about, yes, okay, go ahead.
Yes, I should add to that. This is a law that has been there for a very long time in the whole income sales tax, because sometimes they do the some of those laws were put in place because the tax system did not develop at that time. So as a result, to make sure that every tax business entity is brought into the tax net, so they have to do some of those things. And I strongly believe in the modern time in which we are, the authorities are really considering this aspect of it, because you cannot be making a loss and continue to pay tax genuinely.
Absolutely. 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 Thank you very much. I think there are a lot of conversation going on in terms of improving our tax system. Once compliance enhances and then the business dynamics have changes, I believe some of this conversation is good to have them so that the authorities would understand that these are really affecting businesses, and at least to put them into perspective if they are to do any review. And that will take us to the next one, which is key as well, which we have seen affecting a lot of businesses, making a lot of price changes as far as goods and services are concerned, which is the famous withholding tax, where you always have issues with suppliers where they will tell you, no, I have to increase my price by 10% because they are paying the tax percent. What is this withholding tax, Mr. Jatta, and how does it apply in different incomes, and why the withholding tax, to put it into context, please?
Thank you very much, Mr. Salifu. This is a very powerful question, and it has effect on almost every business, particularly those who are service providers. The withholding taxes, as per the tax laws, it's perceived to be an advance payment of corporation tax. You know, the authorities are always in need of funds to be able to carry out the responsibility vested on them. And therefore, they came up with this to say, you have been, mandated as an entity for any contractual arrangement that you have with a company for services rendered, to make sure that in effecting the payment, subject them to withholding tax. This withholding tax is of two types: the local services and international services. For local services, they are subject to 10% withholding tax, and for international service providers, they are subject to 15% withholding tax, and that's a final tax for the international, because they will not be required. But if you come to local companies or indigenous companies, resident companies for that matter, to be precise, they will be subject to make a declaration at the end of the year, because the withholding taxes that they actually suffered, it's considered as a tax credit. So once they do their tax return, they will be entitled to recover, to deduct that tax credit that they have. But there is a procedure for that. When you actually supplied and you issue your invoice, if you are subject to withholding at domestic level, the recipient of your service must give you a withholding certificate and pay you the net. But this withholding certificate, one has to be very careful how and where do you actually make the deduction. Because this deduction has to be, you have to look at the structure of the invoice. Because when you look at the invoice, you have your service fee plus VAT, and then you have in deducting the withholding, you do not have to touch the VAT, because VAT is, you are only acting as an agent of the state in collecting that VAT. So your fee is where you actually will have to deduct the 10%. Now, that is why the person is going to give you a withholding certificate for the deduction on your actual fee. You will now present when you're actually doing your filing or when you're doing your annual return. Yes, this is the actual situation, but it is also a challenge nowadays. And I know the authority is really trying to to come up with some of those ways of addressing it. That's why most of the time, if you are subject to a tax audit, they will look at invoices that are subject to withholding and withholding has not been effected on them. they will compute as a liability and ask you to pay. So which is going to be somehow very hard on businesses for non-compliance.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, it's very key. You've mentioned a very key importance, especially for accountants to understand that you can deduct a tax on tax, which is especially in terms of the withholding tax, where an invoice is giving sometimes without disclosing the VAT. Is critical to get some of these things right, to ensure that you do not overtax or over withhold to some of the service providers, which is key. However, it's been increasing a lot of prices, but I think the sensitization is going on board a lot. So we go to the next direct tax, which is famous or infamous in the country, predominantly applied by private sector. The law is not only for the private sector, but it's for all institutions, which is the FBT, fringe benefit. Tell us about what fringe benefit is. Yes.
Okay. Actually, when you look at the Gambian tax system, in other jurisdictions, they call it benefit in kind. As the name implies, that means there is no physical cash movement. If you to tax a person, it's easier to tax him when he actually holds the cash. That is, it's easy to take it out from there. But this benefit in kind, these are the incentives that are given by employers to employees so that they can keep them in the employment, keep them happy, and also for them to be able to increase their productivity. So those type of things are the one that they will always give to the employees to keep them. It ranges from a motor vehicle, which is common. It goes from the medical attention for the employees and their immediate family. Any benefit in kind, any benefit as far as a benefit, the name implies, anything that the company is giving you, which you do not have to really give money. Housing, medical, loan at a discount rate, and so forth. So anything that you actually are not paying for and you are benefiting it from the company is called a benefit in kind. That is a FBT, fringe benefit. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Why some of these questions are coming up, we're not going into the technical details of the calculations and to establish how and what, but it's just to give a flash, to give an overview of what some of these taxes are and to have an idea that they exist in our country. Just to reflect on a couple of months ago when the government says that compliance on rental income, everybody was crying foul and saying, no, the government introduced a new tax. It wasn't an introduction of a new tax, but an enforcement of an existing law. So these are new things that people are hearing, I can say, because one, yes, they are not specialists. And they do not really dig deep into the Tax Act. This is where the Accord Associates come into play. As a firm, as a consultancy firm for the past 10 years or so, what is the benefit of coming to Accord Associates as an advisory firm, especially in the area of tax, Mr. Jatta?
Well, like you did rightly mention from the inception, the certainty of two things. One of them is taxation, and the unforeseen and unavoidable is death. So when you are into business, you are already under the umbrella of the state. And therefore, one of the key things which is required is about compliance. Compliance is something that the state will not compromise with. And they required you at any point in time to make sure that you are doing the right thing. Because if you pay your taxes well, it's how now the state will be able to utilize those resources to build the necessary infrastructure, pay the civil servants, and meet all the obligations that we have entrusted the state. Because we all must remember that the state does not manufacture money. It takes it from us, and it takes it from us and plow it back to us. So compliance is key. And that is why there are measures, punitive measures also, which are put for non-compliance. Because the way it is seen, others are compliant, why not you? So if you are not complying, the tendency is you will be caught one day, because, and the way the law is designed, we have what is called a self-assessment regime. You go and file your return based on what you think is right. But the authority has 6 years to come after you. So after this, during that 6 years, whenever you are found not complying, there will be penalties and interest imposed from the day it was due until the day you have paid. So you can imagine the consequences of not complying on time and what it can bring to you. This can easily lead to a closure of a business. Absolutely. And the most important and the most powerful person when it comes to compliance is the authority, the revenue authority, because there is nobody else who is immune. They can easily walk into a premises and then close the premises, and even not stop there, they can easily prosecute you for non-compliance.
Absolutely.
So, Accord Associates, as a professional firm of accountants, we believe in professionalism and in doing sincerity work with the clients to advise them sincerely, because that is our key role. And we want to make sure that anytime a client is confronted with an issue, and if we are approached, we are like doctors and lawyers. What your clients will, you can always make sure that you tell your client exactly what's your problem, so that we can see how to approach the problem. If it requires us engaging the authorities, we will do and ensure that the matter is resolved. Because to do a good business with a person or even with the authority, there should be integrity in terms of your relationship, so that each person does not look at the others with suspicious mind. So Accord Associates stood firm on those principles that we will always stand in a difficult situation to be on the side of the client and be able to negotiate with the authority in the best possible way, so that the clients can comment, or if he has not been compliant, then he can start complying going forward. That is what Accord stands for.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jatta. Considering our tax system is a self-assessment regime, and not everyone is a tax expert, it's always advisable to establish or engage with a professional tax advisor to help and guide in assessing your taxes to submit to the revenue authorities. We don't want to go into deep, but even there are liabilities on paying, at the end of the year, paying less than 50% of your total obligations if they are assessed. So I think if the law is to be followed to the latter, then it becomes very painful to most of the people, considering that people take it as just a normal thing and do their assessment for themselves. But the self-assessment regime comes with obligations, comes with responsibility. And I think the best way is to engage the services of a consultant on some of these things. And there is no better place to go than Accord Associates, considering that they are our partners in this. Yes, we will use that as a marketing tool as well. Thank you very much, Mr. Jatta, on that. And if you want to know where Accord is, they are somewhere in Kaniping opposite NEA. That's where you have their office. So you can always reach out. You can have them on their website as well. I think it's www. Later we will share, or they can share their website on this platform for people to access them, and maybe share their contact number as well where necessary for further advice. Thank you very much, Mr. Jatta. We've been discussing more on the direct taxes, leaving out the indirect taxes, and I think Pa has just shared the website there, which is www.accordassociates.gm. Go to the website and check on their services and contact them if you need any advisory. Thank you so much. So now we move to the indirect taxes, which affect everyone. Everyone. You purchase a ginger, you're paying taxes. You go to the supermarket, you're paying taxes. I can remember when it was introduced in 2016 from you. You said, Salif, I'm no more going to the supermarket. Now I'll be sensitive even going to the supermarket when it was introduced. So tell us about our withholding tax, with our VAT tax system, and what are the services or the goods that are attracting withholding tax, VAT, and what rates do we have in terms of VAT, value added tax, as it is rightly said? Thank you.
Very much, Salifu. I think is today you really touching and then hitting the taxes on their heads in the Gambia. I think maybe one is to give a brief history about the VAT. I think prior to 2012, or to be precise, prior to 2013, January, as of January 2013, the Gambia was using what is called sales tax. Yes, it was a sales tax. And in that case, it was only one-sided. You only collect and give, and that's where it's. But but this is something that actually it's part of the protocols of the ECOWAS harmonization. So it was a requirement that all the ECOWAS member states must move into VAT, because the world is almost on VAT. So to make harmonizations and comparison between nations easier, the Gambia has to come on board to adopt VAT and dropped sales tax. So in all that process, in 2012, the Income and Value Added Tax Act 2012 was enacted to repeal the income, the sales tax, Income and Sales Tax Act 2004. So actually, what it does, VAT comes into play to ensure that businesses are going to act as an agent of the state. And there are conditions also for you to become for you to be able to charge VAT. First, you must be dealing in qualifying goods that actually are vatable. And these vatable goods, that means whenever you are actually selling to anybody, you should be able to load VAT on them and acting as an agent of the state. But also you as the business, you are not immune, because from the inception, especially if you are an importer, the goods will land at the ports, and then during the clearing, the customs clearing, you will suffer part of the custom duty. There's an element of VAT loaded. So when you buy, you get that element, you will have to account for it. That means you will consider it as input VAT on imports. So you will recognize it, and this is what I have suffered on behalf of the customers. And now when you bring the product in, you look at it and do your pricing. Strip off the VAT first, do your pricing, and add your margin. Then you close it up with VAT charge on top. But VAT in this country, we have one rate of VAT in this country. The rate is 15% on all services in the country. So therefore, whatever you are selling, if you are, if the product is vatable, then you will only pay or charge VAT on the product, because it's a vatable product. Yeah. Besides, maybe just to make sure that to tell you the type of VAT that we have, rates applicable. Because when you look at the products, there is a prescriptive list that has already come out and said these items are exempt. That basic food items, medical, some of the prescriptive drugs and so forth, they are all exempt from VAT. So if you are a dealer of those items alone, you will not be qualified to register.
Is it only me who lost Mr. Jatta?
I don't think so.
Okay. I thought it was my internet, or it's a network issue from him.
No, Nawek is trying. Anyway,
Yeah, we lost him for now, and I think he was discussing basically very important areas, looking at VAT as exempted and looking at VAT as zero rated, and primarily the zero rated looking at the exports. Basically, I think that's where he was heading to. So the three different rates that we have is the standard, exempted, and then the zero rated. That's basically what he was trying to allude to. So let's try to get him on board. But as we progress as well, participants can start texting in their questions on the chat tab. Because we are fast approaching the time. We have only 6 minutes to 1 o'clock. I think we agreed on by 1 o'clock or 10 minutes after 1, then we'll close up this program. So I'll start working on wrapping up with my final questions before I hand over him to you guys to the question and answer session. So you can continue typing. We have few questions on the tab, but you can continue to type your questions as we progress. But again, if you want to openly ask the question, then you can request. We'll try to unmute you where possible to ask the question direct, or at least to give a statement. It's a general conversation, not going into specific or detailed taxations calculation as we said, because it can be a little bit confusing or different on the data that are available that you determine your computations, considering that what we have is a law, not a regulation per se, but we have an act, and normally acts comes with regulations to guide the procedures on how to establish some of these things. So I think that is of essence. Do we have Mr. Jatta back?
I don't think he's back.
Okay, he is still offline. So basically, that's where we are, and the conversation was definitely on tag in this aspect. So please continue to type in your questions as I said earlier. Or better still, if you want to make a comment, then you can raise your hands. Once I close up with my questions, then we would basically do that. So, or either do we have Adi while we wait for Mr. Jatta to come? Adi, you want to make a comment?
Adi, you're unmuted.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you, Salifu and Pa, and also to our presenter, Mr. Jatta, who we are all proud of, and his presentation was really good, and we really appreciate his time giving us some insights on some of these things. But I just want to maybe make a few comments. As you may be aware that I think most of us here, we are either working as accountants or tax practitioners, or in one way or the other, we are somehow linked with taxes. But honestly, I think even us as direct stakeholders, if I may use that word, to tax, we are finding it somehow very difficult to understand some of these specifics of our tax system. I do attempt to make a lot of search for resources on our tax system, but in general, all what I used to have in return is the IVA, that is income and value added tax 2012, and in addition to that, maybe I have at some point seen a summary of our tax system that was, I think, carried out by PwC some time ago. So, but all what I'm trying to address or trying to contribute is maybe because we all know that an act or a regulation cannot be used to explain the tax system or sort of trying to get into the details of everything. So, and even in our schools where we learn taxes here in the Gambia and the University of the Gambia in particular, we don't even get a sort of a detailed book or text or something that would get into the specifics of our tax system. All what we do is to study other tax jurisdictions, or just have to go on the surface of our tax system, and really that's not helping even us as direct interactors with the system, let alone people who are not accountants, they are not tax personnel and things like that. So I was thinking maybe FLF, maybe in collaboration with experts here, we could think of maybe having something like trying to pick it from the act and maybe develop a text sort of that would get into the details of everything, because honestly at work level, and also at other level, we do receive a lot of questions on tax issues and things like that. So I know there are a lot of issues and there are a lot of comments in my head, but in the interest of time, I just choose to maybe bring this up, and maybe Salifu, we can have more conversations on this. And
absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Edie. We're using it to see Mr. Jatta on track as well. He just mentioned that he is back, but just to answer to some of your, or to make a comment on what you have said, quite right. As practitioners as well, or for tax for a couple of years, we faced that challenge. But I think it's a collective responsibility as well. What the government does is to provide us with the acts and the guide. And I think it's the responsibility to some extent of the professional as well to bring more light to this, considering that we're the one having to deal with this on daily basis. As you rightly mentioned, I can remember those days at Deloitte, some of these taxes used to be, we used to have a tax highlight, I can remember, where every budget speech that a write-up will be done on respective taxes. And I think this is what is lacking in the industry. And I think it's a challenge to Mr. Jatta and to all of us, the young ones, to start writing this. And I think sometime in 2022, there was a team that was set up to start looking at the taxes and at least come up with a local tax. It was disheartening when I heard that even at the University of Gambia, they do UK tax system. What does it benefit to them? Nothing, absolutely. So you are very right. So Mr. Jatta is back on track, and let me quickly complete some of the things that we have. In the next 5 minutes, then we will start the question and answers. Then people will have the opportunity to make in comments and we answer their questions. So Mr. Jatta, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, hope it was not Navek.
No, it wasn't now. It was a technical problem. All right.
Thank you. We were just having a comment, Mr. Jatta, from Adibot.
Yes. I had it.
Yes.
I had a comment as well. I think just maybe to look at the issue, but actually, I'm very much grateful for some of those questions and then comment. In the sense that it's in the spirit of turning around this country to become what it's supposed to be. And as you know, you are the future generations that need to really transform this country forward. We can take it in the hard way and transform this country. Honestly speaking, it's like the mind is bigger than the ability. Yes, because we always have the feeling that this is what we think and we know it's not going normal. We need to transform to become a better nation by equipping the young generations with the necessary skills required. But if you are like me, the mind is bigger than the ability. You think wide, but you can do little. But this is a collective responsibility if we all put our hands together. I think, Salifu, as you know, he can maybe, because in his forum he will come in some occasions to at least highlight a lot, because currently we have almost registered the Institute of Taxation in the country. So therefore, we are trying to see how best we can forge forward to make sure it becomes functional and it can look at taxes in relation to this country, which you people cannot, you are the key stakeholders. So it is quite important that we can see the way forward. Yeah, I think I left at one point, which is the zero rated.
Zero rated, yes.
Yes. I think zero rated, when you look at our Gambian tax system, the Gambian VAT system is destination based, where the destination based in the sense that you can only pay VAT in the country if it's intended for local consumption, because VAT is destined, you know, our VAT is destination based. That means if the consumption is to be done in the Gambia, it's becoming a vatable. If the product is vatable itself, then it becomes a vatable issue. But when you send goods outside the country, which are supposed to be, if you have traded them locally, they should attract VAT, then it becomes zero rated. Zero rated in the sense that the items would have been vatable if they were to be consumed locally. But the fact that they are sold outside the country, they are called export. So export generally is zero rated. So this is actually some of the things, unless also categorically mentioned. Sometimes government will come with a policy and say, look, this item, they used to charge VAT because it becomes more and more expensive. And, you know, for people, the government said, we have canceled VAT on this item. So that one also becomes zero rated. So this is why it can either be zero rated or exempt. So exempt is the one that they clearly mention. No VAT, like rice, there's no VAT in it. That means it's, but when things that are exported outside the country, as I said, that is considered as zero rated. So you have the standard rate, zero rated, and exempt. These are the type of products, you know, the rates that you may actually see. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Jatta, for that clarity. Thank God that I didn't make a mistake. I was trying to take it up from there, and I think that's what you just elaborated further. And we will now take 5 minutes just to complete few questions. I've seen 2 people raise their hands to answer. So please allow me to complete my last 2 questions. Then we will come to the question and answer session. Because at the beginning, we already had lost about 5 to 10 minutes before we start. So we're going to compensate that. So since we've started, Mr. Jatta, we've been just discussing about paying taxes.
Right.
It's obvious that there are exemptions as well. It's obvious that there are incentives in any system. They might seem small, they might seem not very attractive. What are some of the investments or exemptions and incentives that we have specific to enhance investment in the country as far as taxation is concerned? Just to put some light on that.
Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I think this is a very valid questions that investors would always be interested to hear. And it's also an opportunity for them to grab. You know, every country has got a challenge in a special sector or special sectors. And that's always, they will always want to encourage businesses to explore those opportunities. In doing so, there are always incentives attached. Like in the country here, as at the moment, you have the area of agriculture. When you come up with an investment into the agricultural sector, and you realize that there's an opportunity that you can make your investment, and the government will give you also some sort of tax break, which means you can enjoy up to 8 years, between 5 to 8 years of tax-free investment. And sometimes even in the importations, you are giving certain exemption duty-free in bringing certain products into the country. So that means if you are doing business in prioritize, that's what we call the priority areas. So government will always tell you, okay, you come in, we are giving you free incentives. Like if it's land that you need, they may provide you with land and said, well, we can give you the land. We can also allow you duty-free on importation of certain products. We can also exempt you from corporation tax. All these things are significant benefits that can actually be tapped by entities. So it's also, and the place to go is at GAIPA. GAIPA is the one responsible for investment promotion. So anybody who is actually looking for those type of services, you can easily approach GAIPA for those guidance. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. And again, we're in the 21st century, as the millennials, they call it. Mr. Jatta, we can't go without talking about leveraging on technology.
Yes.
There is no conversation that can be had in this generation without leveraging on technology. I know there are a series of challenges that we've not discussed in terms of what you encounter on your daily basis, dealing with both clients and dealing with the GRA. But what do you think administrators can do, taxpayers can do to leverage on the current ecosystem of technology to ensure compliance, transparency, but accountability as far as taxation is concerned? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Salifu, you've been hitting always the right questions and most of the questions which are very, very, very relevant. As you did rightly mention, technology is, you cannot do away with technology if you want to continue to exist, not only in terms of business, but in terms of our day-to-day life. Today, everybody is hooked onto the telephone. Before you know it, if they said that internet is suspended for a day, it's like you'll see a lot of people walking like something has gone wrong with them, because that is part of their day-to-day life. And the most important thing is about investment in technology, and especially those of us in practice. We need to make sure that filing is going to be done on e-filing platform, has to be upgraded or created, because this gives us opportunity to be able to cut down a lot of significant time in processing payment, in going to the Revenue Authority and so forth. And I think currently the Revenue Authority is working on a new platform. It's called e-filing platform, okay? So that at least people can file from a distance. I believe it is at an advanced stage at the moment. We are all required to make sure that if we want to be not left behind, we must tune in and work fast to be able to catch up with the requirements of modern time. So otherwise, we will not be there for prosperity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And once again, Mr. Jatta, for me, is so humbling. And I intentionally left out this question to be the last one. I will use this opportunity to formally or to publicly congratulate you for your recent appointment on the tax tribunal, which I think one of its first of its kind that it's happening in the Gambia. The tribunal was there before. I stand to be corrected, but this is the first time to constitute a team to at least work on the interest of both government and taxpayers. And once again, congratulations. But just to put a context or to elaborate on it for people to understand, to use it as a form of sensitizing to the people, what is this tribunal about and how will this benefit taxpayers? And it's intentional to mention benefiting taxpayers because my understanding is meant to bring about transparency, accountability, but more especially justice with taxpayers. So tell us about what is the role of this tax tribunal as far as its establishment is concerned. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Salifu. The tax tribunal, it's also enshrined in the Income and Value Added Tax Act 2012, that its creations, it's essential. And the objective of it is to create impartiality just, transparency, and confidentiality, to have confidence in the tax administration. That this system, the tribunal does not exist to sideline with any entity. It is completely independent of GRA. It's completely independent of the Ministry of Finance. It is like it's supposed to be a standalone entity established to hear issues concerning taxpayers. Aggrieved taxpayers need to go and file their complaints based on the procedures that actually are established. So therefore, it is mainly to ensure that every taxpayer who is aggrieved and do not have an opportunity before, now you have an opportunity to be able to launch your complaint, and there will be a tribunal that will listen to your complaint and address it accordingly. So therefore, it is one of the things that actually will make sure that nobody can go away without your problem being resolved. And they encourage people, because GRA is not the one controlling the tribunal. The tribunal is completely independent of GRA. So if you have your issue, you are encouraged to lodge your issue. But we are yet to do a lot of sensitization and to ensure that there is an independent location where the entity is going to be established and have its own secretariat, so that people can see it. Because when you say independent, you have to be perceived to be independent. So this is actually one of the key cardinal functions of the tribunal, to listen to cases. And most of the people who are even in the tribunal are not GRA. There's no GRA staff in it. It is headed by a high court judge. It's headed by a high court judge and some private practitioners and lawyers who constitute the membership. So this is why it's considered to be completely an independent entity. And we will encourage anybody in the future, when you have your cases, come forward. Don't shy away. The problems are here to be resolved. Once we know the problem, we should be able to address it. And once your problem is addressed, it's not only for you, but there are other people who might be affected in the same way. But your interventions or your courage to come forward will solve other people's problem. So this is what it exists to do.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jatta. Fairness, transparency, confidence more especially. But I think one of the key things that you've mentioned is to be perceived to be independent. And this is very critical for confidence building, to ensure people will come forward when they have issues. It's obvious that wherever you have dealings, there will be issues. But there should be established independent institutions or perceived independent institutions that will be mediators to ensure that whoever is seen as doing wrong is corrected. So I think that was very critical. This is where I will cut the curtail on my question and answers. Then we will allow the question and answer session for 10 minutes to see what we have on the chat sheet to answer before we close the program, Mr. Jatta. For me, it was very, 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 very humbling, as I said again. But going to the questions, I have one, Mr. Siddharth, I think it's Siddharth. Just trying to read the questions that I have. Yes, so says a question: are school learning institutions required to pay corporation taxes? Mr. Jatta.
It depends on the incorporations. If a company, if it's incorporated as a limited liability company, and therefore it falls within the profit-making ventures, because those who are profit-making entities are subject to pay corporation tax. And that's why it is quite important that when you want to incorporate a company, you have to look at the nature of your business before you go ahead and register the company. If you register it as a limited liability company, that means it exists to make profit. So therefore, it will be subject to corporation tax.
Thank you very much. I think that goes with our own alignment of what we mentioned earlier, the type of companies that you establish. I think once it is established as a non-profit making, it's become very easy that under Section 25 that you can have it as an exemption. But as mentioned by Mr. Jatta, your incorporation determines how you're going to be taxed as well. So it's very critical to engage the services of a professional at the very infant stage, because these are mistakes that occurs very frequent. So the next question is from Pa. Do you still have to pay 2% on turnover when you are a loss-making entity and also an audited entity?
Thank you for the question. Like we said, there are two thresholds of taxes in the country, which is profitability or the minimum tax. Is under the minimum tax, you have two layers. You have unaudited and audited. If you are a loss maker and you are being audited, you will be required to continue to pay 1% of your gross turnover, because there's nowhere mentioned to say that if you are audited, you have to pay 2%. 2% is for unaudited entities. Yes. If you pay 2%, you're not supposed to pay 2%. That entity should not pay 2% because, one, there are so many indications. You may file the return based on unaudited financial statement, but there are always indications to say to point out that you will be audited if you have already recruited an auditor. The auditor is working on your financials. Okay. And it's also a requirement that, you know, as a public entity also, that you have to present your accounts to the public public enterprise committee, because you cannot take unaudited financial statement to them. You have to be audited to be able to present those financial statements.
Absolutely.
It's more ideal you have to pay only 1%.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much. We have another one from Mr. Yaya. Oh, Y Camera. I don't know why I'm calling it Yaya. It could be Yusufa, but Y Camera. Good work going on. Thank you, Mr. Y Camera. For withholding tax, if my opinion will be heard without tax, withholding tax should be removed from the system, excluding PAYE. This is just inflating prices, especially government institutions. I'm quite right. I think we've actually discussed about that as well. Thank you very much, Y Camera. Then we have from Adijuf, what sort of cases, I think, without paper sensitivity, people might take the tax tribunal as a tax advisory entity. Okay, that's a comment as well from Mr. Adijuf. So if we have people that want to speak, we have about 5 minutes to go. I think we had few people that have raised their hands, which is Babu Karmane and Y Camera. So we can allow them, we can make the comments short or the answers short in favor of time, please. So Pa, you can unmute them. We can give at least an extra 5 or 10 minutes for people to make a comment before we close the program. So you can unmute one of them, yeah.
Thank you. We can start with Babukar.
Yeah, good afternoon, Salifu and Modu, and thank you very much for your continuous initiative in ensuring that as accountants we are engaged. And congratulations to our senior for the appointment to the tribunal. You know, he's our senior.
Absolutely.
I think to start with, I think his deliberations are very educative, and it also shows us not only high cost of finance are making our SMEs to fail, but also the minimum tax regime. Because as MSEs, if you are loss making, in addition to your high finance cost, you have to pay 2%. There is no way you can survive. So it's an indication that it's one of the contributing factors why our SMEs are not surviving. And the other comment is on the withholding tax. And I think as an accountant, we have a key role to play. And in doing so, we need to be bold enough and strong in ensuring that we comply with the law and not allowing suppliers to charge us. Because I remember about a week or two ago, I had this conversation with one of his suppliers because he billed us and we engaged him for price negotiation. And he was honest enough to tell us that, you know, I have included 10% on the price. I said, no, the law don't require us to pay the withholding for you. we are to reduce it from your bill. So basically, what the suppliers are doing, they are making us to pay the withholding tax for them and not advancing it on their behalf. And I believe Mr. Jatta have actually dealt with that. But I urge all the accountants to be very strong in ensuring that we don't allow these suppliers to make us pay the tax on their behalf, because otherwise we'll be making advance payment on their behalf, and it's not going to come from their fees also, which is good. I think my last one is more of a question, and I believe my senior will help us to understand, because having worked with both public and private sector, what I observe for private sector employees, there is no allowable cost in terms of paying of their taxes, because as we all know, there is no individual filing system in the Gambia where we can go and file our returns and make some tax returns and receive some tax returns and all that not. But I observe that in the public sector, there are allowable costs, like the allowances that they are paid are not taxable. But for private, it's 100% tax. And to me, I believe the tax regime should be fair to all citizens. I don't know what will be your comment on that, Senior. Thank you.
Okay. Moderator.
Go ahead, Mr. Jatta.
Yes. Thank you very, very much, Babukar, for this valuable question. It is a very important and it's a burning issue question that everybody is concerned about. I think, yes, there are no two tax systems in the country. There is only one tax regime applicable to both public and private sector. Unfortunately, the public sector is still, anchoring on one, what do we call it? There's a document that was even in the days of the, what's the name of it?
I think it was a monitorium.
Yes,
monitorium.
exactly. There was one document that was issued during the Second Republic that exempt all the PEs and government-related entities from payment of tax on basic. But it is not a law. It is not a law. This was a directive that is given, and it's a moratorium that has been implemented and is still affecting the private sector. Yet, I think it is important that respective taxpayers in the private sector should be in a position to engage government to discuss the issue, and then we come aligned up with that. Because obviously, some of these things is difficult to outline now, but it's a matter of engaging. Because there could be people in authorities are not aware of it. They may think that the private sector is also enjoying the same incentive. So what we need to do is about engagement. We need to engage with the public sector, and finally, we should be able to have the situation resolved. And I think it's out of many, this is an exception. So engagement is important. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so we move next to the next person, Pa.
I think we have some questions in the chat box.
Okay, but is Yaya still available? Because I know he's been raising his hand for a while.
He lowered his hand. I'm not sure if he's still interested.
Yaya, if you want to speak again, you can actually raise your hand. So the next question that we have is from MB Show, and it reads, and what's the rationale for disallowing national educational levy in computing CIT, which is corporate income tax? And again, the same person mentioned, what's the most appropriate tax for employing sales agents, withholding tax or payee? So there are two questions. So we can start with the first one on the rationale for disallowing the national educational levy.
Yes, the national educational levy, this is through an act. It clearly did mention in the act, it's a non-deductible expense. So the moment it's saying non-deductible, there is not much you can ask question why, because that is it's an act that says that you are required to pay national educational levy, but these expenses or this cost is not subject to deduction. So it's like a levy imposed. So you cannot do anything on that. The fact that the law says specifically it's a non-deductible, you cannot deduct it. That is one of the conditions why people will pay it and they cannot take an advantage of that. Okay, the other side of it, which you mentioned about employing agents. So the agents you are employing, it depends on the relation, because you have to have what we call contract of employment, contract of service and contract of services. Sometimes it's very important to look at the badges of trade associated with the employment. If somebody that you actually is coming to your office and staying there, you tell him where and when to go, and you give him work or tell him to go at XYZ, you direct his you direct him where to go, you paid his monthly salary, and it's a salary. And in that case, the relationship between you or that person called agent is a contract of employment. So a contract of employment will be subject to PAYE. But where you actually liaise with an entity outside your entity, which is almost like you pay them for services that they render, and that's where it stops, those ones will be subject to withholding tax on the fees that actually you are billing them. So this is the relationship. That's why I said it's quite important to look at the contract. If it's a contract for services or a contract of services, that's one of them is like you have a complete control over when, where, and how to work. That is employment. But somebody you can only contract for a specific thing, do this for me, and that's where you stop. He is also engaged with another entity. He has so many clients of your nature. So that one definitely will be subject to withholding tax. I hope that answers the question.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And yes, you have Mr. Mane on standby.
Oh, good morning, Mr. Salifu and Mr. Jatta.
Thank you.
This is a very wonderful presentation, even though it is outside my expectation, but I achieved more than I was expecting anyway. Because I was looking at the aspect of to say the computations aspect, but it's more important to know what you are going to compute about than knowing just the computation and move on. Because if not, it's just mechanical application of the system that you are going to do without even understanding what is happening.
Absolutely.
So this is a very good one. Salifu, this is Yoro Kamara from National Audit Office. It's not Yaya. Thank you. Mr. Jatta.
My able auditor.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that wonderful presentation. And then the setup is very good. We really learn a lot. It's very good to create this kind of dialogues with the people. It's at least once this is done, you also try to share this recording with the people in the platforms and others, because I can see the participants is not much, but what is discussed is very, very material to our day-to-day life as far as tax system is concerned. The issue of this withholding tax is always my problem. To me, in the person, I always cry when I go to the auditees. Like we look at them and then we'll say withholding tax. Some of them will directly cry to you. They say, look, if we even tell them to withhold tax, we will be withholding tax. The only thing they will do is to add 10% across all the prices that they are having. Now we have to educate them. But the problem is we, as auditors, we cannot get to the suppliers. It's only the auditees that we can advise. Yes, this is not something that that it is adding should be added to the price. The only thing that should add your cost is the VAT. After the VAT, there is no other thing that should be added for you to pay more, because like it's withholding. They are saying withholding. I think also it's high time GRA also need to go out to the public, meet these suppliers. You understand? Sensitize them about this thoroughly. Because when you say withholding tax, and these people are seeing it as a cost on them, that's how they are seeing this withholding tax. They're seeing it as cost on them, not knowing that these are the amount that they should have been paying to GRA directly for themselves. Now GRA want to ensure that they increase their tax collection through these institutions by collecting, withholding the tax, and then they remit it to them for them. It's just like the PAYE. When we say the PAYE, it's also another withholding tax. But hadn't been, every employee is allowed to do their own tax return. I will start with Mr. Salih for himself. He may not submit his PAYE on a monthly basis. So that's why they levy it also on the corporations. They said, yes, you institutions, please withhold the tax. Once you withhold this tax, this PAYE, remit it to GRA. But that doesn't mean that when they are withholding the tax, they are increasing our salaries. They are not increasing our salaries. They're just taking it from our salary. It's the same application across towards the PAYE, towards the withholding tax on supplies or services. So I think GRA also have a little role. We accountants also, we need to help, especially when we have small opportunities with these suppliers and so on. Stopping at the institutional level, like we, the auditors, cannot help. But you, the accountants who are buying direct from the suppliers, you can help a lot. So just to cut it short, because people like us, we always like to be talking anyways. So thank you very much, Mr. Jatta, for giving us this opportunity, and Salifu. So we look forward to see more of this, more and more of this, because like we are always ready to learn. Some of us is not that we don't want to apply, but we don't know how to apply. Yeah. So thank you very much, Mr. Jatta. Thank you very much, Mr. Salif.
Thank you very much, my able auditor. As you rightly mentioned, it's intentional that we brought this conversation like this, not to go into the technical computations, as you rightly mentioned. It's good to understand the basis before starting the computation. Computations, I just take them as templates that you need to fill in, but having the base knowledge that guides you towards doing the computation, basically. So I think you're right, that was possibly the expectation, but we've actually thought about it and realized that this is the best approach. However, as the Finance Leadership Forum is here to engage professionals, is here to network, is here to learn and share among professionals. This is just the starting of our conversation across different sectors of the finance professions. And I promise that we'll be doing more of this, not only in the area of tax, but every quarter, we try to establish and at least have a webinar where we will engage on different areas. Please, we use this opportunity to welcome all those people that are new today on this platform to at least come on board. To register, it's just 1,500 for the first year, subsequently 1,000. It's an independent institution established through the Attorney General of Chambers, and we have an executive member. Our AGM is coming very soon, and next members are to be selected. Please come forward. This is what we have as professionals to share. And I think this is a perfect opportunity for all of us to come on board and start sharing the little that we have through some of this established platform, because each and every one of us cannot just go and reach out to everyone, but we can use some of these platforms to do it. And again, the next, to answer some of the questions that you've raised, this recording will be shared on the FLF platform, which is both on YouTube and on the website of the FLF. So please, we'll share this, but reach out to our platform. So I think we've already passed the 1 hour 30 minutes mark of this, and I'll be honest, I think we have taken so much time of Mr. Jatta. I think we have Adi raised his hand.
Salif, you are muted. Can you unmute yourself, please?
Am I good?
Yeah.
Okay, so we can just allow Adi to make his final comment, then we hand over to Mr. Jatta to close before we move.
Adi, you can mute yourself, please.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Salifu, once again. And Mr. Jatta, we are really grateful for your time. and of course everything. I just had a final comment, a very, very final one on the withholding issue that we've been discussing here all along. I think as accountants or as finance persons who are dealing with suppliers directly, sometimes also the problem is we as accountants or I would say paying agents within our various institutions, we only get to interact with the suppliers at the later part. So it's like in many cases, it's our procurement specialists or our procurement managers or others within the institutions that would do the negotiations and things like that. So the only time we would have the chance to enforce is let's say when an invoice comes to us, or when or let's say when the contract reaches our desks. Unless and until there is that general atmosphere of understanding what withholding tax is within an institution, sometimes it will also be very difficult for accountants at their level to implement. So I think what I would encourage is when we go back to our various institutions, let's have this conversation with our head of our institutions, and of course everybody. Let's involve everybody so that everybody would understand that this is a collective responsibility. It is not just the accountants, it is not just the paying person, but it's everybody. It's the institution that should withhold, but not Adi as an accountant who should withhold. Because definitely I've seen instances where people would tell suppliers, it's our finance people who are saying we should withhold tax and things like that. So I think generally we should start desensitization within, and then of course it could be propelled out to our various suppliers and other stakeholders. And thank you so much, Mr. Jatta, once again. Salifu, thank you, Pa Fati, and everybody. And we're hoping to have such conversations more in the future. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adi. Thank you very much, audience. Mr. Jatta, your final words before we close. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator Salifu Ba, and the entire management committee of the FLF. And this is really a very, very welcoming webinar. And we will encourage you to continue to provide this service, because it's about sharing knowledge. Nobody claims to know everything, but such a gatherings is also an opener for people to be able to grab the opportunity and then share the knowledge. I know it would have been very, very difficult for individual to get me to bring these things. And I know it's going to go beyond the team that we have here. So therefore, I will implore and encourage everybody to continue to engage, because it's through engagement we can understand our problems. We can seek solution to our problem. So therefore, this the leadership forum, that actually the role it is playing is very, 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 very key and pivotal for the future development of this country. Because here we are talking about taxation of our own country. And therefore, taxation is key. It's a requirement that everybody must know the basics of taxation. And we will encourage people to make sure that send your questions, ask questions, organize something of this nature on a periodical basis. We'll be in a better position to actually come together and share. Because whatever happened, some of these things, maybe when it comes to the issue of withholding that everybody is just seeing as a challenge, there could be a way of addressing the issue. But we need to come together, and we need to also encourage the authorities to see how best those challenges can be addressed. We are in it together. And on that note, I would also like to inform you, Accord is always available to ensure that we partner where it is necessary. Because knowledge, nobody in this forum claims to know everything. There are certain times you have challenges on a particular area, but when we engage, we can easily get a solution to the problem. So this type of forum will encourage leadership forum to continue to organize such wonderful webinars to encourage participants to join. It's really, really great, and it's a great day. I did not regret spending my time with you people today. It's also great because at least some of them says they were not expecting it this way, but they have learned a lot. But we hope that this will continue and even a bigger fora. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to share the little that we know. We do not claim to know everything, but at least the little that we understand, we are able to share in the platform for the benefit of participants and for the benefit of other people who would have joined, but due to other circumstances, we are not able to be in the platform. Thank you very much, the leadership of FLE, and I'm looking forward for greater partnership in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jatta. Thank you very much, participants. It was so fulfilling that we had this discussion, especially in the area of tax. I think we need to move this further. It will be more interesting to have this discussion even at the level of the University of the Gambia, to engage in a bigger forum where professional accountants, business people will sit and have a dialogue around taxation. And this is what we are aiming for as an association or as a finance leadership. It is not a competition. We are here just to say what we have, but we are here to complement each and every other institution that is established in this Gambia, irrespective of its status, irrespective of its membership. So it was so fulfilling to have you, Mr. Jatta, as I mentioned. But before handing over to Pa as the PR member as well, PR and membership manager, I cannot go without thanking the team that I work with behind the scene to ensure this happens, which includes Mr. Parfati, the president Ibrahim Sawane, who usually is in actually the one starting the event. But due to his engagement in order, he is online, but at least trying or allowing others to lead the platform. So having him on board is something that we have to recognize, that he's been a great leader on this platform. We have the likes of Pa Malik as well, who is in Nigeria. These are all great people working behind the scene. You have the likes of Jabumane and all the PR membership. I thank everyone, but most especially as well to the ESCOM members who gives us the leeway to actually come up with some of these programs. So Pa, over to you to do your closing remarks. And thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Jatta.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Salifu and Mr. Jatta. I think it was an insightful discussion. Although we overrun the time by almost 30 minutes or more, I think next time we need to improve on the time, and if we have such an important discussion. So thank you very much. I will call on Ansumana Dabo. He's the Learning and Development Manager for Finance Leadership Forum to give a closing remarks. Thank you. Over to you, Ansu. You can unmute yourself, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mohamed Fatih. Thank you, Salihu, the moderator, and our guest for today's webinar, Mr. Jatta. On behalf of the FLF, FLF Accord Associates, they are the main sponsor for this webinar, and both in cash and then in kind. We'll be bringing Mr. Jatta on board for this brilliant and exciting educative for almost an hour plus. All the members that are in and non-members, we thank you for joining in and then to learn from these exciting events. This is what FLF has built on or established on, to learn, share ideas, and then network. So we encourage these things to be coming in always. All the institutions that are in Gambia here, anytime you can come up with ideas so that we can engage and we can do consultation, because through consultation, engagement, that's how we can learn from each other experience and expertise. So on behalf of FLF, the State Accord Associate, thank you very much, and then all the participants. Thank you. And over to you. Yes.